Welcome back to our series on Plato, video 2 in the Laches. Today we're talking about a principle that Plato brings up in the Laches on moving from particulars to general. And it's an important movement because I guess for anyone who's taken, say, a mathematics course, usually geometry, something like that, or really, I guess, any mathematics course, if you want to prove something or you want to give the definition of something, it does not suffice to just give examples. So if I want to define what a triangle is, I can't just draw a bunch of triangles. That's not comprehensive. Our goal is to move to a definition that fits for every possible triangle. And so the only way to do that via examples is to come up with an exhaustive list, which for triangles is impossible because there's infinitely many of them. This principle that he talks about in the Laches is, of course, courage. And it's interesting the way they approach it. They begin with a demonstration of a man in one-on-one combat. He's sort of giving a combat demonstration. And the dialogue picks up right at the end of that and moves immediately into a discussion of courage and martial combat and things like that. And so the dialogue itself begins with a specific example leading toward a discussion of form, a discussion of the overarching generalized principles. And the discussion that they have starts with one of the guys giving examples of brave actions. And Socrates has a quote that I think is really important for understanding what we mean by generalizing. He says, "What is the common quality which is the same in all of these examples and which is called courage?" And so we have an example of someone holding their ground in battle. We have an example of someone, I don't remember what the examples are off the top of my head now, but imagine someone standing in battle and someone telling the truth even though they're going to get in grave, serious trouble for something they've done wrong, but they're telling the truth about this. They're the one that had it. And someone who, another good example of something courageous. Standing up for something that's right in the midst of everyone around you is against it. So they're doing different actions, but there's something that's the same in all three of those called courage. And so if I want to know what courage is, I can't just know those three examples. I need to go somewhere and sort of extrapolate, well, what is courageous in each of them? Because there's also truth and goodness, and you've got skill and luck and all sorts of stuff mixed in. So what part of each of those actions is the courage part? And so once I know what courage is, then I could see it in other things. I can identify it. And I think it's important that the dialogue does not begin with the theory. It does not begin with what is courage in the abstract immediately. It starts with the examples. And so just because we're going from examples and we want to go up to generalization, I think it's important that Plato does show that you have to start somewhere. And by starting with specific real-world examples, one of the benefits of doing that is that whatever you come up with in your theory is grounded in reality. You aren't starting with an idea and then imposing that idea down. You're starting with the world and what it really is like, and you are describing it. and you're trying to come to a general understanding, but of the real world. And that's the difference between philosophy and ideology in a big way. Although the two get conflated a lot, and I would argue it's because much of modern philosophy is the other direction. It's really ideology. It's not a pursuit of truth. It's let me tell you what truth is, and then force reality to obey that. And that's not philosophy. That's not a love of wisdom. That's an ideology. That's a power struggle. Philosophy is going and trying to seek the actual truth of what's going on. And the way you do that is going from specifics to principles, not the other way around. And so our knowledge of principles has to always come from reality. An example that could be used is, say, a plumber. Say you have a leak, there's some problem with your pipes, and you hire a plumber. A good plumber can fix the pipe. That is the praxis, that is the specific action that a plumber ought to be able to do. He can fix pipes. And that's a plumber who knows the praxis. He knows it's the best way, so the physical, he knows the what of plumbing. A great plumber is one who understands the what well enough that he has extrapolated the why. He understands the why and the how these things fit together. A great plumber doesn't just fix the pipes, he can also prevent future problems because he can fix them in such a way that it will actually decrease the number of problems over time because he understands the whole system, not just leak, tighten. It's more complicated than that, but not a lot. He can fix a specific problem, but he can also apply that knowledge generally to the system and come up with a working system. And that's why Aristotle describes theory is, everyone agrees that theory is better than praxis. He says this because someone who knows the theory will necessarily be able to apply it to praxis. And I suppose that brings up another question of, what about all these people who know theory really well and can't do the praxis? Well, at a certain point, they probably don't know the theory the way Plato and Aristotle mean knowing the theory, knowing the generalization. They might know some things that are not praxis. That doesn't mean they know the theory. It just means they know things that aren't the praxis. The theory really is a true knowledge of the praxis applied at a higher level. And so if you ever want to test, do you understand the theory well? Well, the question becomes, I don't know, can you do the praxis? If you cannot do the praxis, Plato would argue you don't really know the theory. If you cannot do the thing, if you cannot identify what is courage in individual things, it's because you don't actually know courage. If you actually knew courage, you'd be able to do it. And so if you think you know what courage is, but then you can't identify it in other things, or you can't do it, you cannot be courageous, it's because you don't actually know what courage is. You've just fooled yourself into thinking you know what courage is. You have a false image of what courage is, which is another reason why all theory needs to come from the actual reality. That way you're not coming up with a strange idea, calling it something wrong, and then misapplying it everywhere. In sort of closing, one of the other important things they do is the whole dialogue is set out specifically about the education of their sons. And I think it's right, it's fitting that they begin by talking about the education of children. But very quickly, by the end of the dialogue, they are all discussing how each of them, these three adult men, need to go and learn more. They've gone from the obvious or specific, what is who needs to get educated? Children, obvious. It's sort of your obvious, specific example. But once they start describing what education really is, it becomes obvious to all of them that you need to educate adults. Adults need to seek education and learn more and more and more all the time. And so it's another example of them going from specific to general. And so from all of this, I think our main ideas to pull away from this are, our understanding of things needs to be grounded in the reality that we're seeking to understand. And that education, this constant search for greater and greater understanding of the world, is begun in children, but really it continues and ought to become an even more as we're adults. We should be learning more while we're adults, not less. So with all of that, I'll end this video and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me in this series on Plato. If you'd like to see the next video in this series, go ahead and click right up there. If you missed it and want to see the previous video in this series, click over there. And if you like this content and want to see more, consider subscribing.